Welcome to the preview video for Season 10 of my Oklahoma Sooners Dynasty, formerly known as my Oklahoma Sooners Death Penalty Dynasty. I feel like it's been long enough since we had any restrictions. We won 4 straight national championships, 5 straight Heismans, and we are currently on a 64-game win streak, so I feel like it's no longer right to call it a Death Penalty Dynasty. Let's start by taking a look at our schedule for the upcoming season. In week 1, we will host USC in Norman, who are currently ranked number 22. I always like to start the season off with a ranked opponent, and they are the only ranked opponent available, which is why I picked them. Then we will travel to Auburn to take on the Tigers, to Ole Miss to take on the Rebels, and then we travel to Arkansas to take on the Razorbacks. For the preseason, they are ranked number 12, so hopefully they are higher ranked by the time we play them, and they're a good team. Then we get a home game against Tennessee, then a bye week. Then we get to travel to Dallas to take on the Texas Longhorns. Following that game, we get to head back to Norman and host Nebraska. Then we get another bye week. Then we host Mississippi State. Then we host Texas A&M, who is currently number 8 in the preseason. Then we get the Missouri Tigers in Norman, and then we travel to LSU to take on our former defensive coordinator, who is now the Tigers head coach. Then we get a bye week, and then we get to travel to Stillwater to take on our former offensive coordinator, who is now the Cowboys head coach. Before I move on any farther, let's jump over to Madden and figure out exactly how that has gone for everyone's rookie season and figure out where guys like Chris McKinney are going to get drafted. But before we can see where this entire draft, including Chris McKinney, goes, we have to see exactly how good the last class did in their rookie season. However, before we see how they did, we have some old players I want to check in on, like wide receiver Tim Scott. This was the first player I ever put into Madden 23 for this series, and it looks like this season he finally switched teams. He had been with Kansas City, had a breakout season last year, decided to leave, he went to San Francisco, and ended up with 695 yards and 7 touchdowns this season. The next player up is middle linebacker Dallas Tremblay. This was one of the first defensive guys I ever recruited to the series. He was one of my favorite defensive players for a while, and this season he finally got to start. He was an undrafted free agent, signed with Tampa Bay, bounced around to a few teams, but finally this year in Detroit he got a chance to play and came up with 148 tackles, 4 sacks, and 2 interceptions. I am glad to see he finally got an opportunity. There is also former quarterback Clark Nelson, but he really hasn't gotten any chance to play his entire career. He has been a practice squad quarterback. Finally, this season he was on the main roster, but he was the 4th string quarterback for Cincinnati. Going into the next draft class, we have former Oklahoma running back B.J. Smith. He was also one of my favorite players that I had in this series. He ended up being a 5th round pick to Seattle, and let's see what kind of stats he put up this year. He had 389 yards and 9 touchdowns. His rookie year, he put up 14 touchdowns. It looks like he's their goal line back for some reason, but either way, he's putting up touchdowns at least, just not getting a lot of yards. Strong safety Kawika Moore was one of our hardest hitting safeties in this series. I believe he's been a backup pretty much his entire career in Green Bay, but this year he did get a career high in tackles, and he got 3 interceptions this season. Now heading back over to Seattle, they have defensive tackle Mike Handy, and let's see what kind of stats he has put up so far in his career. Not a whole lot. I don't think he's really gotten any playing time, even though he's only the 3rd defensive tackle on the Seahawks roster. Moving on to the next class, we have quarterback Ty Downing, who is now a superstar X-Factor. In his rookie season, the Panthers won the Super Bowl and he won NFL MVP. Let's see how he played this season. 5,800 yards, 32 touchdowns, so he threw 12 less touchdowns and threw about 9 more interceptions, a total of 16 picks on the season. So definitely like a sophomore slump, I would say. They did make him throw the ball a lot more though. One of the best receivers we have had in this series is Wayne Outlaw. He was drafted to Chicago in the 2nd round a couple years ago. Let's see what kind of numbers he put up this year. A lot better than his rookie year, over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. Joey Miller was taken in the 5th round near the end of it at pick 28 by the Detroit Lions. He's pretty well buried on their depth chart. I don't expect many stats here. Yeah, 10 catches, 187 yards, but did manage to catch his first career NFL touchdown. The last of this receiver trio to leave that season is wide receiver Jeff Benson. He was taken in the 5th round by the Las Vegas Raiders. Let's see what kind of numbers he put up. A lot better than his rookie season as well. 65 catches, 864 yards, and 8 touchdowns this year. Still in this same class, Jake Wright was taken by the Carolina Panthers. Let's see if he put up any numbers this year. Not really. He is a backup, so he doesn't get a lot of playing time. The only other players from this class are left tackle Marlon Ellis, who is currently on the Panthers practice squad, and then if we go over to Jacksonville, we will also find free safety Eric Kemp on their practice squad, where at least he was for a minute. Maybe he got signed, Maybe got brought up to the main roster? No, he did not, but he's not on this team right now. Well, sadly, Eric Kemp is not currently on a team. He may have been picked up in the middle of the year and then released, and no one else has picked him up since then. Now, we finally get to get into this rookie class, which is the guys that left during the Season 9 offseason, and we start with free safety Brian Alexander, who was taken with the 7th overall pick by the Indianapolis Colts. And this season, he ended up with 88 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, no sacks, and no interceptions. So not a spectacular season, but I don't think he was awful either. And now we jump over to Chicago, who selected defensive back Alex Red with the 10th overall pick in that draft. Let's see how he did this year. He ended up with 59 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, but he got 3 interceptions this season. Just a couple picks later in that very same round, with the 12th overall pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers took wide receiver Lane Washington. He was phenomenal for us at Oklahoma. Let's see what he did here. He got 662 yards and 6 touchdowns, so a pretty solid rookie season, especially because he is like the 4th rated receiver on the Steelers depth chart. The Jets would end up drafting defensive back Eugene Blake, and let's see how he did for the Jets this season. He ended up with 5 tackles and no interceptions, so really didn't get any playing time. The Vikings spent a 4th round pick on outside linebacker Justin Rogers in the last draft, and this year he ended up with a little bit of playing time, only getting 13 tackles and 1 tackle for a loss. The Saints would spend a 5th round pick on defensive back George Steele. Let's see how he did for New Orleans this season. 16 tackles, no interceptions. Once again, not a lot of playing time. Later on in the 5th round, the Texans would select Ashton Mills. Now, I had to put Aston Mills as his name for whatever reason. It wouldn't let me put Ashton Mills. He is still a hidden depth trait. I believe I made him a star depth trait, but obviously did not play a lot of downs. It looks like he played 50 downs between the preseason and the regular season, so I imagine these stats are going to be pretty low. Yeah, 1 total tackle. Safety Jason Tremblay would go undrafted in this class, but let's see if he got any playing time with the Chiefs here. He ended up with 19 tackles, no interceptions, no tackle for loss. Sticking with Kansas City, they would actually spend a 7th round pick on wide receiver Rich Anderson. Now, Anderson did not get a lot of playing time at Oklahoma. He was pretty buried on the depth chart most of the time. Let's see if he did anything in the NFL. He got 15 catches for 164 yards, but no touchdowns. Our former kicker Jermaine Allen went undrafted, ended up signing with the Commanders, but apparently at some point this season ended up going over to Jacksonville, where they currently have 2 kickers on the roster for some reason. Our former center Steve Thomas actually went undrafted as well, and he ended up with the Indianapolis Colts, where he is currently a backup. And then we only have 1 more player left to check on before I show you guys how, the playoffs are set up for this season and everything. And that would be left guard Josh Higgins, who the Ravens took in the 4th round. Now checking out the playoff standings, the Chicago Bears go 14-3. So Wayne Outlaw and Alex Red could both have a Super Bowl ring this season. The Rams go 12-5. The Giants go 11-6. The Falcons go 11-6. Ty Downing and the Panthers go 10-7. The Seahawks have gone 9-8, and the 49ers have gone 9-8. Over on the AFC side, the Dolphins have gone 13-4, the Chargers are 12-5, the Bengals are 12-5, the Raiders go 11-6, so Jeff Benson gets into the playoffs, the Steelers are 10-7, so Lane Washington gets into the playoffs, and the Texans go 10-7, so Ashton Mills is in the playoffs, and then the Titans go 9-8. I don't think we have anyone on the Titans. This season's Super Bowl is the Houston Texans against the Chicago Bears. Ty Downing and the Panthers actually get bounced in the very first round of the playoffs by the Falcons. BJ Smith almost makes it to a Super Bowl with Seattle, but I think the only players we're going to have in this game is Wayne Outlaw and Alex Red with the Chicago Bears, and then over for Houston, I think we only have Ashton Mills. Your Super Bowl champion this season is the Houston Texans, led by quarterback CJ Stroud. The Super Bowl MVP goes to Derek Stingley. The NFL MVP goes to Tony Davis, the quarterback for the Bears. Coach of the Year goes to Nick Waters, the coach for the Bears. Offensive Player of the Year goes to Justin Jefferson. Defensive Player of the Year goes to Nick Bosa, who now plays for the Giants. Offensive Rookie of the Year goes to a wide receiver for the Panthers, and Defensive Rookie of the Year goes to a safety for Cincinnati. Before we head to the NFL draft, let's go over everyone that I put in this draft class from Oklahoma, starting with quarterback Sean Griffin, currently the 4th rated quarterback in the class. He is still expected to go in the 1st round. Then we have defensive end Dwight Rollins, who is currently a top 5 projected pick. He owns the record for most sacks in a single career in college, completely and totally shattering that record. Then we have defensive tackle Ryan Covington, who is currently projected in the first 2 rounds somewhere, and is right now the 5th highest rated defensive tackle in the draft. The next player up is middle linebacker David Jordan, also projected somewhere in the first 2 rounds, right now the second highest rated middle linebacker in the class. In my opinion, the best corner available in the draft is Adam Jackson, who was our number 1 corner last season, came away with 5 interceptions, finished his career at Oklahoma with 12 interceptions, right now projected to go in the first round. One of the more shocking decisions during the offseason was wide receiver William Brown deciding to leave. He comes in 6'6", 231 pounds, projected to go in rounds 3 to 4. Not a lot of college production, but he has a lot of potential. This center class is not very strong, but the top one available is Josh McDougall. Then the one everybody is waiting on, running back Chris McKinney, the 4-time Heisman winner, probably the greatest college player we will ever see, projected to go in the top 5. The only one projected above him right now is quarterback Eric Culber out of Virginia. The New Orleans Saints own the number 1 pick in the draft. Let's go take a look at their roster and see if they need a quarterback or if they could possibly take Chris McKinney. They have a 33-year-old Mac Jones and a 23 overall Mick Harrington, who has a day 1 starter and QB of the future player tag. It looks like he was just taken last year in the draft, so maybe they don't go quarterback number 1. Their running back position is led by Josh Phillips, who's only an 81 overall. It is time to figure out if the Saints are going to go running back with the number 1 pick. With the first overall pick in the draft, the New Orleans Saints are going to select Dwight Rollins, defensive end out of Oklahoma. Not the OU player I was expecting to get drafted number 1, but they get a very good defensive end. The Indianapolis Colts own the number 2 pick in the draft. Their quarterback room is James Richter, a 72 overall with a day 1 starter and QB of the future player tag, backed up by Tyrion Moon out of Texas Tech with a future starter and Trey Target young player tag. I don't know if they will look to take a quarterback, and their running back room is still led by a 96 overall Jonathan Taylor, so I'm kind of hoping they don't take McKinney. With the number 2 pick in the NFL draft, the Indianapolis Colts are going to select running back Chris McKinney out of Oklahoma, so he will sit behind Jonathan Taylor. That is kind of disappointing, but maybe they move on from Taylor a little sooner than they thought now that they have McKinney. That is one deadly backfield though. Here is officially your number 1 overall pick. He comes in as an 85 overall, a superstar X Factor. I made him and McKinney both X Factors because they were both dominant forces for us. I don't care what the ratings were in college, they both set a massive amount of records, but Dwight Rollins goes number 1 overall. Then with the number 2 overall pick, the Indianapolis Colts take running back Chris McKinney, even though they have a 96 overall Jonathan Taylor on their roster. Hopefully McKinney can find the field a little bit during his rookie season. We would actually have one more player taken in the top 5. With the 5th pick in the draft, the Arizona Cardinals would select Adam Jackson. With the 19th pick in the first round, the Carolina Panthers select David Jordan, so Jordan will once again have Ty Downing as his quarterback. Later on in the first round, the Pittsburgh Steelers would take quarterback Sean Griffin, so Sean Griffin now has wide receiver Udlane Washington. I believe he only had him for 1 season before, but now they're reunited. We would actually manage to sneak one more player into the first round. That is defensive tackle Ryan Covington. I honestly expected him to go in round 2 to 3, but he sneaks in at the end of the first round and pick 31 to the Chicago Bears. With the 29th pick in the 4th round, the Tennessee Titans take the risk on wide receiver William Brown. Then just a couple picks later, we have another player headed to Chicago. The Chicago Bears, with the 31st pick in the 4th round, would take center Josh McDougall. So what I decided to do before I ended this video is I made a new coach, went over to the Colts, and decided to trade Jonathan Taylor. And now I'm going to switch back to control of the Eagles just so nothing's really screwed up here. Now that I'm back in control of Philadelphia, I didn't want anything to mess up because I had been controlling the Eagles the entire time, so that's the reason I did that. But now I'm excited because McKinney will actually get some playing time this season, and we'll see exactly what he can do in the NFL. But for now, I'm going to send you back over to the Season 10 preview video. Now that that is taken care of, and shockingly Dwight Rollins goes number 1 overall, we can come back here and take a look and see who is getting redshirted. The first few seasons of this dynasty, I really could not afford to redshirt anybody, and now I feel like we are running like a normal team, and I'm able to redshirt some true freshmen like Josh Pearson. He was going to be our 4th string quarterback. Now I can redshirt him, he'll get a year to develop. And then over at running back, we are redshirting both Lance Ramsauer and Kevin Ziegler, 2 true freshman running backs, so we will roll with John Jordan, Corey Mays, and Victor Alexander. Over at wide receiver, we're going to redshirt true freshman Jermaine Irvin. Last season I redshirted Seth Phillips. This year it's going to be Irvin. We are not going to redshirt Adam West because I will get to that in a minute, but I believe he is going to be our kick returner. I'm only going to redshirt a couple players here on the offensive line. The first one is true freshman left tackle Brian Moore. And then over here at right guard, we are redshirting Derek Suggs. Along the defensive line, there are going to be 3 players that I redshirt. The first one is going to be Lee Sowell, who I got at the very end of recruiting during the offseason. At right end, we're going to redshirt Luke Todd, and at defensive tackle, we're going to redshirt Kevin Dickens. The only linebacker I am redshirting is outside linebacker Steve Butler. He's a true freshman, 81 overall. He was either the number 1 or the number 2 outside linebacker in his class, because I actually ended up with both of them, but I don't remember which one of these guys was number 1 or number 2, but Ian Wilson will be the only left outside linebacker technically on the roster. The final 3 players that are getting redshirted on this team are all in the secondary, starting with defensive back Chris Summers, and then at free safety we have Brian Curry, and at strong safety we will be redshirting Russ Anthony. Jumping over to the depth chart, I will be going back to quarterback here in a second, but I want to give a longer explanation to that one. So we're going to start here at running back with John Jordan, obviously our number 1 back. Corey Mays will get some carries, but Jordan will 100% be the lead back this season to try to prove that he can do exactly what Chris McKinney was able to do for 4 years. At fullback, I will be starting true freshman James Harrell over Sean Howard. Howard has a bit better pass blocking and impact blocking, but Harrell has a bit better run blocking, and then also James Harrell is a lot faster than Sean Howard, which is why we're going to roll with him as our starting fullback instead. Wide receiver is a position that may actually change as the season goes on, but for week 1 at least, John Carrington will be our number 1 outside receiver, Seth Phillips will be our number 2, John Mangum will be in the slot for the 3rd straight season. Past that, we will have Robert Weber, Adam Campbell, and then Adam West. At tight end, I decided to keep going with Thomas Patterson just because he's been our starter the last 3 seasons. He hasn't been bad. Whitaker is a lot faster, but I don't want to break the offense by switching tight ends, and I think Patterson is still pretty solid. Running through the offensive line, our starting left tackle will be Andrew Harrell, who is an 87. Our starting left guard will be CJ Clark at an 89. Center will be Travis Clark, a true freshman, as a 79 overall. We will definitely have to keep an eye on that. Right guard will be Eric Weber, who is an 83, and right tackle will be Joey Rutledge, who is an 85. Redshirt freshman defensive end Paul Manning will be the one to replace Dwight Rollins on the left side of the D-line, and then over at right end will be Dwayne McDaniel returning to the starting lineup. Defensive tackle will be J.R. Pearson, followed by Chris Rowland and Jermaine Rice. I think this may be a solid rotation throughout the season. Pearson obviously did not develop like I wanted him to during the offseason, but I still think he's pretty good. Starting at left outside linebacker will be true freshman Ian Wilson. At middle linebacker will actually be Nate Thompson. I considered making it Tommy Hollis, but we'll circle back around to why I made it Thompson here in just a minute. At right outside linebacker, we'll be starting Brian Bass, who was an 84 overall. Now, coming back over to Nate Thompson, the reason I've decided to move him over to middle linebacker for the season, he's not near as fast as I would like him to be, but he does have 97 play rec and then 75 zone coverage, so I'm hoping he can make up for the loss of David Jordan just a little bit with that play rec, but if he starts to play bad, I will put in Tommy Hollis. Moving into the secondary, I've decided to make a little bit of a change here. Jeff Cox and Ben Rivers were going to be the number 1 and number 2 corners for this season, but I've decided to move Elton Butler and Trey Bolin up to be the number 1 and number 2 corners. They're not that much slower than the other two. And then if we scroll all the way over here and look at man coverage, these two guys are a bit better than them. 90 man coverage and 93 man coverage, 84 and 83. These two guys got burned a bit last season, especially Jeff Cox. He lit up a lot of passing yards against really good receivers. So we're going to move Elton Butler and Trey Bolin up to the top and see if that helps us at all. Over at free safety, we have Dwayne Jones returning to the lineup at a 95 overall, most likely his last season as a Sooner. If it's not, he may come back for his senior year and be a 99 overall. And then at strong safety, Walter Siegel actually regressed in the offseason, which really sucked to see. So we're going to start Kyle Olson in the secondary, an 80 overall, 90 speed, 87 acceleration. 66 awareness isn't great, but it's higher than Jason Mitchell, the true freshman that we brought in. But Mitchell will be the backup. And if we scroll all the way over here, we can see their tackling ratings is an 80. So if he starts to miss a lot of tackles, Mitchell could come in. And then over here is play rec, 75 to 65. This was the main reason I decided to start Olsen over Mitchell. Not much of a shock here, but our kicker will be Brian Wood and our punter will be Jim Kelly in his final season here with the Sooners. True freshman wide receiver Adam West will be both our kick and our punt returner due to his 96 speed. I know his acceleration is only an 82, but we'll see how well he does in the first few games. If he does well, we'll stick with it. If not, we can move on to someone else. Now for the quarterback position. I said in the offseason video this was going to be a tough competition for me to make. I know Townsend and Brooks are very far apart in overall. Townsend's a 91 overall, Brooks is an 80 overall. Townsend also has 92 speed, which is very, very tempting. 92 acceleration as well. I know he could run the ball a whole lot. I think a lot of their overall difference, though, is in awareness. Townsend's a 78, Brooks is a 53. That doesn't really matter if I'm the one controlling the quarterback. And then all the way over here, you can see that Brooks has a 95 throw power. Townsend only has an 82. He is the most accurate quarterback on the roster, though. But I played a lot in practice with all three of these guys, Townsend, Wheatley, and Brooks. I also used Pearson before I actually redshirted him, but decided ultimately just to redshirt him and move on. But our starting quarterback going into week 1 of the season will be true freshman Doug Brooks. I think the 95 throw power is going to be a huge, huge factor. If he is starting to be a problem with accuracy, we can always go back to Townsend, but for right now, we're starting the true freshman. Now let's check out the preseason awards, starting with all conference. We have running back John Jordan, wide receiver John Mangum, left guard CJ Clark, defensive end Dwayne McDaniel, defensive tackle J.R. Pearson, right outside linebacker Nate Thompson, defensive back Jeff Cox, defensive back Trey Boland, safety Dwayne Jones, and then we don't get our strong safety here, but we do get our kick returner with Victor Alexander. What about second team? Anyone make it here? Don't see anyone so far, and it does not look like it. Actually, we get a couple people. Walter Siegel, who actually lost his job, and Elton Butler both make it. And now for just the regular All-Americans going into the season, you have wide receiver John Mangum. He might be the only one that makes it on offense, and he is. Dwayne McDaniel gets first team honors, J.R. Pearson as well. And then defensive back Jeff Cox and safety Dwayne Jones, along with kick returner Victor Alexander, but he's not going to be the returner this season. And second team, CJ Clark makes all nation second team or All-American second team, whatever you want to call it. And then we also get Walter Siegel up here. Once again, though, he did lose his job. We are not on the preseason Heisman watch at all, and the leader here is Gerald Smith, the guy that would have won the Heisman if Chris McKinney didn't completely explode near the end of the last season. Your preseason top 10 is California, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Florida, Alabama, Oregon, Virginia Tech, Texas A&M, Michigan, and Georgia. But that will finally wrap up this Season 10 preview video. In the next one, we will kick off Season 10 in Week 1, taking on the USC Trojans in Norman. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you next time.